Before I get into this one, I'm going to read out a report. But before I get into this, just a few musings on the Labour Party and where it is right now. In my last live stream, one of my subscribers, apologies, I can't remember, who asked what I thought of Starmer's government, and my reply was I made a video of the first 100 days. I think it's difficult to summarize any government in, just one sentence. And of course, it depends on the policy areas. I I'm not a Tory and I've never voted Tory, but I don't say that absolutely everything they done was wrong. But one of the things I was very, very critical of the Tories on was their, frankly, callous attitude to welfare. What I mean by that is their obsession with sanctions, their obsession with trying to look tough. And the reality is, in the last 14 years, and it goes beyond that, of course, but you know, I'm using that time frame because of David Cameron's so-called Big Society. Um, People were pushed over the edge in the DWP. You know, you had cases of terminally sick people were sent threatening letters from the DWP telling them that they're fit to work. I am so fed up of successive governments in this country taking this attitude to welfare. When the welfare state was set up in the late 40s, early 50s, it was intended to be a safety net and it was intended to be providing a support system for people. Um, I don't think the plan was ever to try and sanction people, to try and make it a situation where people would feel stigmatized and criminalized if they were signing on. Um, Now, I was very, very critical of Jeremy Corbyn as leader, and I stand by everything I said. I think his foreign policy was an absolute anti-West disaster. I absolutely did not trust Jeremy Corbyn when it came to foreign policy. However, on the domestic front, I will say this: at least he got it right when it came to, Corbyn wouldn't go along with the stigmatizing of claimants. I will give him that. In many other areas, I wouldn't support Corbyn. I wouldn't trust him on foreign policy, on crime, on issues like that. But at least he recognised that Labour had to be different from the Tories in that regard. I think centrist Labour figures, I say centrist, but they're no different from the Tories, really. I don't see any difference between Liz Kendall's attitude and the attitude of Ian Duncan Smith, for example. I see no difference because in both cases you have ministers using those two as examples, but you know you could take any work and pension secretary over the past probably 20 years and they've came out with very similar attitudes. Um, it's been about wanting to sound tough. It's been about promoting a sanction culture. Now I know what Labour is doing because as political they're very aware that the Tories accuse them of being soft on welfare and promoting a situation where people take it as a lifestyle choice. So instead of actually being Labour and doing what they should do, promoting compassion, they are pitching to the Tory narrative. They're trying to look tough. Now, having said that, of course there are fraudsters. Of course there are people who cheat the system. There was a Bulgarian gang arrested a few months ago and given pretty hefty sentences because they were raking in. I think it added up to millions. That's disgraceful. That is criminality, right? It's wrong on the taxpayer. It is costing the economy. So I have no sympathy with people like that or other high-level fraudsters. If someone has, say, I don't know, 6 children by 3 different women, and he is just raking in thousands, and he's exploiting the system, and that is clearly wrong, right? So I would say that I acknowledge that, but what I really have a big problem with is the um, it's a collective punishment, effectively, because what I'm going to read out, I think it's the Work and Pension Secretary Liz Kendall claims that it's a sound system. I don't think it is. I think it will absolutely be ripe for abuse. With that being said, I'm going to get into it. Um, but yeah, I'm very disappointed with Labour on this. Well, I say disappointed. I'm not actually surprised. I never thought that Starmer's Labour Party be a lot more compassionate in this area. I am disappointed, but not overly surprised, because I know why they're doing it. They're trying to fend off Tory accusations that it's soft on welfare. Anyway, this is the report. It's from Yahoo News, and the report's by James Cheng Morris, who is a freelance writer. It's from today, actually, the 20th. Okay, so bear with me. It's a little bit lengthy, but I think the details matter. Welfare fraud investigators will be given the power to take money directly from payslips and bank accounts as part of plans to crack down on benefit fraud, as it has been reported. The measure is one of several far-reaching powers set to be included in the government's forthcoming fraud, error and debt bill, according to the Sunday Telegraph. Of course, the Telegraph would absolutely lap this up, or the Tory graph, as it should be called. Currently, investigators must secure a court order before deducting money from someone's wages or bank accounts. The reported measures will go further than those previously announced by the government, as well as the power to deduct money directly from the wages of people who have overclaimed on benefits. The bill is reported to give investigators the ability to compel information about suspected fraud from all private companies, airlines, not just from banks, utilities, and employers. This is huge oversight. I mean, think about what that involves. Writing in the Sunday Telegraph, Work and Pension Secretary Liz Kendall said it was absurd that investigators' powers had not been updated in the last 20 years. She said, "My team are still in 2024 sending letters to gather evidence for those suspected of welfare fraud. Suspected, not guilty, slowing them down to a snail's pace when they could be shutting down serious fraud cases. Our bill will give them similar powers as HMRC to investigate fraudsters. It's time we give them the tools they need for the fight." Said enhanced information gathering powers would allow the state to stop serious fraud in its tracks by making sure people really are who they say they are. However, the powers will not extend to the state pension, with Kendall saying such a move would not be proportionate. Oh, but she thinks everything else is proportionate, does she? But remember, this is people who are suspected, not proven. The plan to spark alarm among privacy campaigners, with Big Brother Watch describing them as Orwellian and a major expansion of government power that threaten the presumption of innocence. Well, absolutely does, because these people are not, they're suspected. They haven't been proven to be guilty of anything. It's merely suspicion. Director Silke Carlo said, in their desperation to look tough on welfare, this is an eye-watering, unjustified overreach and the end of financial privacy as we know it. These are powers more typical of a counter-terror context. It's a blatant assault on the poor to do this to Britain's welfare system. Kendall dismissed claims, of course she did, that the government would be snooping on people's bank accounts as nonsense, and insisted there would be human oversight of automated alert flagging potential fraud. Polling suggests the public is on the government side when it comes to benefit fraud crackdowns. A YouGov survey last month asked 3,566 Britons if they support or oppose fraud investigators being able to access people's bank accounts if there is a suspicion they are claiming benefits they're not entitled to. Of those, 64% were in support, while 24% opposed the measure. Why is the government doing this? Coming into office, Sir Keir Starmer and Chancellor Rachel Reeves have repeatedly claimed there is a £22 billion black hole in the public finances left by the previous government. Institute for Studies has disputed this claim in part, saying that while some of the challenges facing Labour genuinely appear to be greater than anticipated, much of it was entirely predictable. However, Reeves is looking to raise nearly double this, up to £40 billion in tax hikes and spending cuts in the 30th of October budget, with the government looking to signal it wants to avoid any return to austerity. The fraud, error and debt bill announced by Starmer at the Labour conference last month plan to raise more money. The government claims fraud and error in the welfare system cost the taxpayer £10 billion a year. The expected savings delivered by the government's proposals, including reporting measures to take money from bank accounts and payslips, would amount to an average of £320 million per person. A few things to break down there. I think it's a well-written report, so credit to the writer there because he's got all the details that we need. Um, he's showing both sides. That's good writing. Um, but this is very concerning. I agree with the privacy campaigners. They're absolutely treating this like the way terror suspects would be treated. Um, in British law, there is an assumption of innocence. Now, Kendall claims that this system will be secure and people, there'll be human oversight. Well, what happened with the human oversight regarding um, the postmasters? That involved a lot of human oversight. We had investigators acting like thugs, frankly. Everyone knows how awful that was. It was a huge miscarriage of justice, but one of the biggest in British judicial history, where you had innocent postmasters falsely accused of stealing money. Now, I can see echoes here, where you have this sweeping measure, no doubt relying on technology. What's to say that the technology is absolutely foolproof? Um, let's say, for example, fraud investigators suspect someone is raking in more money than they're entitled to, and then they're looking at evidence that that person is doing it. For example, the thing about airlines, ostensibly, it would be that they're going on holidays, and I guess if they say that they're disabled or they are, there'd be other things that might cast some suspicion on that. But absolutely, it does go into overreach now. The thing about the public opinion on this, I don't doubt that the public did respond that way, but frankly, the public's misinformed on this. Frankly, the public believe a lot of what they read in the tabloid press. They will look at extreme cases, such as that Bulgarian gang that I mentioned, and assume that it's the norm. Um, if you look at the British print press, it definitely weighs more to the right than the left. Of our national newspapers, I'd say about 60% are right wing and 40% are left wing, roughly speaking. Um, so, are the public fully informed to say that? Now, I would never propose that we don't do polls. I'd be a hypocrite if I said that. I've quoted polls myself. So that's just part of a democracy. But polls are not foolproof, and sometimes people can be misinformed or they can think that they know the whole picture when they don't. So people answering that probably thought, oh, yeah, we need to crack down on the fraudsters. But I wonder, for example, how was the question asked? Because what will stop? Kendall claims there'll be human oversight. Nah, I don't trust that for a second. Um, and I think absolutely she's just trying to sound tough. She's just trying to be like the Tories. Um, £10 billion lost in benefit fraud. It's a lot of money, but how much is lost in overseas tax avoiders? What I question is making this a central focus of Labour's economic policies, and they are. The conference in Liverpool, they made this a central focus. Kendall, as Work and Pension Secretary, is making it a central focus. I don't say that they shouldn't do anything. I don't say that they shouldn't take action against genuine fraudsters. She's complaining about nothing's been updated in 20 years. That shows that Labour is going even further than the Tories. All the stigmatising the Tories done, all the punitive focus on sanction culture, Labour is going even further. I mean, that's a point worth considering. Even Ian Duncan Smith didn't introduce this. That's saying something. And Ian Duncan Smith was hated in left wing circles. Labour is showing that they are even more hardline. Again, I've no problem with genuine fraudsters being held to account. It is a criminal offence, but I am really concerned that innocent people are going to be accused of fraud. I mean, what's to stop human error? We have seen cases where people have been accused of overclaiming and it turned out to be an administrative error, a computer mistake. I know from having been through the system, claimants have virtually no voice. If you're accused of something, they can sanction you at the drop of a hat. Claimants have very few rights when it comes to actually standing up for themselves. And this is one of the things I think the public's misinformed about. They just assume that people signing on just get free, there's free money and that's it. And they go out and they go out on holiday and they buy loads of luxury stuff. Again, you'll get some people who will do that. The majority of people who are signing on don't want to sign on precisely because of the stigma. And frankly, I think there is a punitive culture in the DWP. I think there are people in there, and this is not to attack everyone who works in job centres, but frankly, you know, there are people who work there who I think get a kick from talking down to people and knowing that they have a little bit of power. They're jumped up little totalitarians, frankly. And they have a little bit of power and they can just take a month's benefits off someone. Um, I really, really hate this punitive sanction culture in the DWP. I think it's callous. I think it's overreach. Um, she's talking about proportionality. Uh, Shame on you, Liz Kendall. I mean, you're absolutely trying to. This is all about being tough. It's not about proportionality. It's not about. No doubt she'll say what's necessary to tackle fraudsters, but I absolutely don't trust her arrogant. I might add guarantees that the war. She dismisses this as rubbish. How arrogant! And while we're at it, a lot of people justifiably will say, wait a second, Labour has been taking controversial freebies. Um, and this just reeks of hypocrisy. When you look at things like this, it, people can be forgiven for saying there's no difference between the two big parties. Because, again, the Tories, were hammering claimants whilst they were indulging in plenty of sleaze. Labour Party, like I said in my analysis of, well, no, it wasn't my analysis, I mean, my live stream. I don't think that the scandals Labour has had will cost them the next election, but it's sheer hypocrisy if they're, taking freebies and so on, all this, what was called Rescue, all that sort of stuff, and yet they're hammering claimants. Keir Starmer, Rachel Reeves, Liz Kendall, these people want to sound just like the Tories. And I am very resentful of it. I think it's callous. I think it's on Labour. Um, in other areas, they may be to the left of the Tories, but this is one area where they're no different. In fact, they might be even more right wing. That's possible in terms of pushing this aggressive sanction culture. That's incredible. Even in the most stigmatizing language the Tories use, they didn't actually introduce this. They didn't introduce a situation where fraud investigators could check on airlines. And I do hope there's pushback. I hope there's robust pushback. I hope the Liberal Democrats step up. They've got 72 MPs. I hope the Liberal Democrats vote against this. Um, in terms of tackling the fraud situation and this black hole, well, there's other areas as well. I can't believe it. It's just welfare fraud that is costing the economic black hole. Um, Probably the number of people signing on that has changed since the pandemic. There will be um, certain things that have changed. The pandemic had a huge effect, but I'm frankly disgusted at Labour taking this approach of just trying to be out Tory the Tories. I mean, Kendall, the irony of this is I looked at her Facebook page to see if there was any sort of responses, and I left one of my own. I think, by the way, it's absolutely valid for the public to challenge elected MPs and particularly ministers, short of threats. I think it's legitimate to criticise. But someone also pointed out, because in one of her latest posts, she's visiting a mental health charity in Leicester. She's a Leicestershire MP. The irony of that, for Liz Kendall to be promoting a mental health charity when her welfare policies will absolutely be having an adverse effect on vulnerable claimants. Another absurd thing she proposed was having um, so-called professionals or people with expertise going into hospital wards to offer support to people who are terminally ill. Now, or who people, I shouldn't say terminally ill, but people who are in hospital wards. So imagine if someone is struggling with debilitative disease, or if they've had a mental breakdown, for example, or there's a whole range of reasons why people require hospital treatment. Now, well, let's say someone who suffers real anxiety, it's a real thing, um, and they're a vulnerable adult, for example, and Kendall's having these people coming in and making suggestions about how they can get work. All that's going to do is add more pressure to them. It's going to give them more anxiety because they're going to feel huge pressure to then go along with that. And if they don't, then they'll get, the benefits sanctioned. This is what I think is utterly despicable about Kendall's approach. It's absolutely based on punitive, it's based on punishment. This goes well beyond saying we've got a problem with fraud and we need to tackle it because she is giving no solid guarantee that there won't be mistakes. I don't accept this thing, oh, there'll be human oversight. That doesn't count for anything. Human beings make mistakes. The problem here is massive overreach. It's absolutely Orwellian, and I agree with um, the privacy campaigners who say that this is basically the way you would treat terror suspects. So Kendall is essentially treating suspected, not proven, suspected fraudsters the same as terrorists. Even and in the case of terrorists, I think there also needs to be solid evidence. You know, assumption of innocence is a very important thing in our system. It's there to prevent miscarriages of justice. We still get miscarriages of justice, but this is something that is very old in English law, going back to William Barrow in the 18th century. Anyway, I'll wrap this up, but I I knew Labour wouldn't be. I was never expecting any fireworks with Labour. I was never expecting them to be much more compassionate in this area, but I am disappointed that they're even worse than the Tories. And Liz Kendall, if claimants start taking their own lives because of the pressure you've put them under, because of the way they're being stigmatized, if innocent people are falsely accused of fraud, that's on your hands. That's on your conscience. And I would challenge her to look at their families if that happens. If innocent people falsely accused of fraud and in the worst case scenario, they take their own lives. This isn't inconceivable. It did happen in some cases with the postmasters. I think I can see real similarities. You know, the difference with the postmaster case was it was private investigators more than the government. It wasn't like government that was hounding the postmasters. It was the likes of Paula Venables, who I believe should be in prison. Um, I mean, and as for the public opinion on this, I think that's very unfortunate. I think the public are misinformed. I think they're assuming that there's a massive problem with fraud in the system. I think there is a problem. I'm not saying there isn't, but I do think it's exaggerated by this hardline approach. Um, I mean, we talk about 10 billion loss in welfare fraud. That's a lot of money. How much of that, though, is deliberate fraud, and how much of it is administrative mistakes? For example, claimant being overpaid because someone in the job centre has made a mistake and actually overpaid them. That does happen. So I'd like to know, it's just assumed that this is all in fraud. Fraud investigators, I don't entirely trust them um, because look at how they handled the postmasters. They interrogated people with no assumption of innocence, just trying to find guilt, wearing people down, treating them like criminals. Graceful. Um, if there is serious grounds for suspicion, like I'll give an example. If you have someone who claims that they can't walk and then suddenly they're seen somewhere going skiing or mountaineering or something, then common sense would dictate they're probably committing welfare fraud and they should be held to account for that. It is theft, right? But I do not believe that sort of thing is as common as the government's making it out to be. I think they're really pushing this to justify their Tory-esque policies. And why are they doing it? Is it really to make up for this black hole, or is it because they want to maintain? I think it's political. I think they want to maintain um, those seats that the Tories got in. Well, maybe it's not that because Labour took back a lot of that in 20 in this year's general election. So maybe I'm reading too much into that. But I do think it's absolutely a cynical, callous move by Kendall and her party. It's by it. Tackling fraud is legitimate, but this is absolutely overreach. Demanding airlines hand over information, banks. This is honestly, I don't make this claim lightly. It's the sort of thing you see in totalitarian states. And I'm not one to make lazy comparisons to, for example, Britain and Russia. Clearly, we're not in that situation. But it is overreach, absolutely. I agree with the privacy campaigners on that. Um, I mean, this thing about, she says nothing's been updated in 20 years. Well, that hasn't stopped innocent people being falsely accused in the last 20 years. So if they can be falsely accused of fraud, pushed over the edge in that time when there wasn't even these powers, then what will happen when those powers are brought in? I hope the Liberal Democrats stand up to it and any Labour backbenchers with a conscience. As for the Tories, that's wasted. Reform and the Tories will absolutely be supporting this because, you know, it's what they've been pushing. As for the likes of the Daily Telegraph and the Daily Mail, they'll be lapping it up because they have a callous attitude to claimants. They always have. The Sun, the Express. I do hope the Daily Mirror speaks out. You know, they've long been a Labour paper. I hope they actually have some integrity and say, wait a second, this is going too far, rather than just towing the government line. And I hope the Liberal Democrats speak out. I hope the Independent speaks out, takes an editorial against it, because I don't accept this thing that Kendall's claiming that there'll be human oversight. I just don't accept it because history shows that humans make mistakes, and unless you can provide an absolute guarantee that innocent people aren't going to be targeted, and bear in mind, this is all about suspected fraudsters, not proven fraudsters, suspected fraudsters. I think it's very disturbing that some machine, some technology can be used to snoop on people and then be absolutely sure that technology will be involved in this. And then, the computer says no, oh, you've committed welfare fraud, you're going to go to jail for a couple of years. It's really troubling, actually. Having said that, of course, genuine fraudsters should be held to account. I just don't think they are as widespread as the government claims. I think this is an excuse, at least not high level fraudsters. You may get people claiming a bit over what they're meant to. Or, for example, they're doing an extra job when they're taking money, but that is not the sort of thing that's going to add up to the 10 billion. That'll be high level fraud. So, yes, that needs to be tackled. But again, that 10 billion figure, does that take into account administrative errors? Um, what about overseas tax dodgers? That probably amounts to a lot more than welfare fraud. It's I'm disgusted by it, quite frankly. I can write to Liz Kendall, but of course she'll never read any letter of contention. I did leave a message on her Facebook page because I believe that politicians face critique. Not threats, but critique. Shame on you, Liz Kendall. You're no different than any Tory. Shame on you.